If Sea-Wolf has felt confusing to you, that's completely normal. A lot of people look at it and think, I understand the idea, but when I actually sit down to play it, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do first, what I should keep and what I should reject, and how I'm meant to build the final trio without wasting loads of time. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through Sea-Wolf step by step using Cognidor's realistic simulation. In this walkthrough, I will take you through Sea-Wolf so that you understand the following: what you see at each step, what you should click or select, which microbes to keep and which ones to reject, why each decision makes sense, what the coach would be telling you, and how we get from step 1 to step 4, and then into Cognidor's feedback section. By the end of this video, you should be able to do two things. First, you should understand this exact walkthrough well enough that it helps you perform better when you see Sea-Wolf. And second, you should understand why Cognidor is useful for this game, because the value here is not just in seeing one answer, it is in learning the logic that gets you to the answer. Before we start, I highly recommend that you click the Start Tutorial button to familiarize yourself with the Sea-Wolf game and its interface, as well as how everything works, but also so that you can familiarize yourself with how Cognidor is able to help you through its coach to pass the game. So, let's get into the simulation. All right, before we click anything, let's read the site properly. For site 1, our target is permeability 2 to 4, mobility 8 to 10, energy 4 to 6. Our desired trait is light sensitive, and our undesired trait is aerobic. That is the whole puzzle. And the first thing I want you to understand is this: the goal of Sea-Wolf is to build the best set of 3 microbes when we get to step 4. That means averages matter. So even now, before we start, I'm already reading this site in 2 layers. Layer 1 is the trait logic. I want at least 1 light-sensitive microbe in the final 3, and I do not want aerobic anywhere in the final 3. Layer 2 is the average logic. The final average permeability has to be low, between 2 and 4. The final average mobility has to stay high, between 8 and 10. And the final average energy has to sit in the middle, between 4 and 6. All right, now we're on step 1. In Sea-Wolf, this is the setup step. The game asks us to choose 2 characteristics to program into the screening process. That can feel vague if you've never seen it before, because it's not asking you to solve the site yet. It's asking you to guide the kind of microbes you want to surface more often. For this site, here is what I would choose. My step 1 picks are the desired trait, which is light sensitive, and the attribute I would choose is permeability with a target of 2 to 4. What you can immediately see is that Cognidor's coach tells us that we made the right selections, and it also tells us why those selections are good. By way of example, if I have to switch from light sensitive to aerobic, Cognidor will tell us that that is not the correct trait, and it will also tell us why. Back to our selections. I chose light sensitive because that's the easiest one. That is the desired trait, and so that's what we should choose because the site explicitly tells us that the desired trait is light sensitive. So I always want step 1 to favor the desired trait rather than to ignore it. Why I chose permeability 2 to 4. That is the more strategic choice. I'm not choosing mobility, even though it's important, because many microbes could still be useful on mobility. I'm not choosing energy either, because the target here is moderate. I'm choosing permeability at the range of 2 to 4 because that looks like the tightest bottleneck for the site. If I can keep low permeability microbes alive, I give myself a better chance of landing the final trio average inside the range. This will make sense as we continue to go. Now that we've completed step 1, let's continue to step 2. In the actual game, step 2 gives you microbes to review and asks you to decide what is worth keeping alive. For now, though, I'm going to walk you through the full Site 1 microbe pool and tell you exactly how I think about each one. At step 2, I'm not asking what is likely the final answer, but I'm asking, does this microbe deserve to stay alive as a Site 1 candidate? That's the much better question. Before I look at any microbe, my rules for step 2 are the following. If it's aerobic, I'm extremely reluctant to keep it because that's my undesired trait. If it hits 2 numeric ranges, that is usually worth my attention. If it also has light sensitive, that gives it a boost. But if it misses too many things at once, I let it go. Now, let's go microbe by microbe. Microbe 1 is Lamentia, where you have a permeability of 6, mobility of 10, energy of 4, and the trait here is heat resistant. Permeability is high and definitely out of range, but mobility is perfect and energy is within range. And there's no undesired trait. So this microbe is definitely a keep. We'll keep it in the current site. And our coach immediately tells us that this is a great pick, and it also tells us why. If at any point you're a bit confused and want to understand your picks a bit more, you can click on the coach breakdown section and you can come and read the deeper analysis. And Cognitor's coach will tell you exactly why the microbe you chose is correct. By way of example, let's look at the second microbe, Aprocola. So here, the permeability is 6, which is definitely outside of the range. Mobility is 6, which is also outside the range. But energy is 6, which is within the range. The trait here is heat resistant, which is definitely neutral. So for the sake of this example, let's choose to keep this one for the current site and see what Cognitor's coach tells us. If we keep it for the current site, it immediately tells us that this was not a good pick. And it's a poor match for Site 1 because it only meets 1 of the 4 requirements. And it will tell you why that's the case when we click on the coach breakdown. That is why Cognitor's coach is helpful, because it can teach us the kind of microbe selections that we should take and why we should do that. For this particular microbe, it missed the desired trait and it didn't have enough attributes in range for us to keep it in Site 1. Let's continue with our next microbe. So our third microbe is Nitrosphaeria, where the permeability is 6, mobility is 7, energy is 4, and the trait is light sensitive. Here I've only really got one clean numeric fit, that's energy, and permeability is too high while mobility is too low. Yes, it has a desired trait, but compared with stronger light sensitive options, this one is weak. So for this one, I'm going to reject it for the current site. So I'm going to click return. But here Cognitor's coach tells us that we should have kept this one in Site 1. Why? Because it has 2 of the 4 required traits and attributes. And because of that, we should keep it in the current pool. So that's why Cognitor gives you the strategic advantage. Let's move on to our next microbe, Chlamybius. Now we're talking. Permeability is in range, mobility is in range, and energy is 1 point lower, but the trait is desired. That means this is a very strong candidate for Site 1. So I'm going to keep it. Our next microbe is Cyanothis. For this one, Mobility's in range, energy's in range, but permeability is too high. However, the trait is desired. So while it's not a perfect fit, it's definitely not bad at all. This microbe gives me two attribute matches, the desired trait and no undesired trait. So I'm going to keep it for the current site. Our next microbe is Ophyllum. Only energy is in range here, and the other two are off. However, the desired trait is there. That's enough for me because that shows that this can apply to site 1. It's not a strong candidate, but we can still keep it. So we're going to keep it for the current site. Our next microbe is Salcella. This one is an absolute star. Permeability is in range, mobility is in range, and energy is in range, and the trait is desired. So no doubt, we're going to keep it in the current site. Moving on to Valisania. Here, it's a bit of an annoying borderline microbe because energy is in range, but permeability is 1 point too high, mobility is 1 point too low, but the trait is desired. I wouldn't call this a top tier candidate, but I would not dismiss it. So I'm going to keep it in the current site. Here, the coach will tell us why it's a good pick, but also why it's not a great microbe to think about for our final trio. After this, we move on to Shigium. Here, quite easy. The undesired trait is aerobic. This means that this microbe is out immediately. I don't really care that permeability is low. I don't care whether I could make the averages work. I don't want this anywhere near my final trio. So this is a hard reject. And we move on to our next microbe, Culpter. Mobility is in range, permeability is high, and energy is low. This is weaker than most, so I definitely reject this one for this walkthrough. And finally, we can move on to step 3. So, for step 2, the screening stage of this process. I hope this has helped you understand how to think about what microbes to keep, what microbes to reject, and potentially what microbes to send to the next site. Step 3 is building the prospect pool. This is the part where a lot of people start guessing because there's still a bunch of good-looking microbes on the table. Here's how I think about it. For step 3, I'm not trying to find the perfect microbe. I'm trying to build a small group of 4 that gives me flexible combinations for step 4. For this run, I want to leave step 3 with strong set of microbes for my prospect pool. The beauty of Cognidor is that we can see what the highest possible score we can get is from the microbes that we've chosen. So for step 3, I want 4 microbes that can mix and match into good trios. 2 that already sit nicely in this site's range, and 2 that can give me the real power on mobility and energy when I need it. Randomly, let's choose one of these 3 microbes and see how Cognidor's coach helps guide us. Of the 3 on the screen, I'm going to pick Vermulus. I'm going to add it to the pool. Immediately, the coach tells us if this was the right pick or not. We can see here that this was not the best pick for this round, and it tells us why. It's usable, but this particular microbe will give us more penalties in step 4 because it does not contain the required amount of site characteristics for us to do well. Let's choose another. For this one, I'm going to choose Barodetta. Why? Because its permeability is just 2 above the range. Its mobility is within range, its energy is within range, and its trait is neutral. So that is definitely a good pick. And I'm going to add it to the pool. And look at that. The coach tells us that that was a good pick. After that, looking at the 3 microbes here, once again, I'm going to choose Plamibius because its permeability is within range, its mobility is within range, energy is one below the range. However, it also has the desired trait, so that is definitely good for the pool. Finally, I'm going to choose Nitrospira. Why? Because permeability is 2 above the range, but mobility, energy, and the characteristic, which is desired, light sensitive, are definitely within the requirements of the site. So I'm going to add it to the pool. And once we've done that, we can continue to step 4, which is the final selection. Welcome to step 4. This is the most important step. This is where the game stops rewarding vague intuition and starts rewarding actual combination logic. In the real game, you only submit one trio, but here I'm going to walk you through all 4 combinations of these microbes so you can see exactly why only one of them earns 100. Before we do that, this is where Cognidor begins to shine. Here you have a study guide which shows you the kind of math you need to do to get the best averages. For the simulation, it shows us all 10 microbes, and it's really simple. We can learn what average means. We can learn what to multiply and why. We can see an example using microbes from our prospect pool. We can understand the step-by-step methodology to get there. And we can even try with an example where we can select 3 microbes and see whether or not they fit within the desired averages. So use the study guide to help you understand better how to select the 3 best microbes. We also have our coach, which is moved to the left-hand side of the page. Here, you have tips and tricks on how to select the best 3 microbes. And right on the right side, you have a trio analyzer, which will do the math for you and show you whether your microbe selections are within the average range or outside the average range and why. That's the power of Cognidor. So let's get into it. The easiest way to do this is not to guess. It is to test the combinations. So for combination 1, I'm going to select Plimibius, Saucella, and Lamenticia. Plimibius, Saucella, and Lamenticia. And what we can immediately see is that the highest possible score we can get from this is 80%. On the left-hand side of our page, we can see exactly why. And Cognidor's coach tells us that we need to fix our selections. It also tells us what to exchange with. If we look at the trio analyzer, it does the math for us and gives us a math tip. And of course, we can look at our coach in a more detailed way to understand why the highest possible score is 80%, and we can see a coach breakdown that can help us interrogate that further. Coming back to our selections, if you're running out of time and you're overwhelmed by the amount of math that's required, Cognidor allows you to use a built-in solver to help you select the best 3 microbes. So for the sake of this example, I'm going to click Solve with Cognidor, which will take us to Cognidor's Sea-Wolf solver page. It'll just take a few seconds to load. But remember, when you take the actual assessment, all you have to do is come to the Sea-Wolf solver, fill out each section with details of all your 10 microbes, and once that's done, you'll just scroll to the bottom and click Solve Ecosystem. And once you click Solve Ecosystem, Cognidor will come back with the best 3 microbes to choose. What we can see here is those are Baradetta, Saucella, and Plimibius. But the question is, why those 3? For the sake of this tutorial, we're going to choose those 3. So we already have Plimibius, Saucella, so all we're going to do, which is what the coach tells us right here, is to exchange Lamenticia with Baradetta. Voila! Immediately, our current score shoots up to 100%. And if you want to know why that's the case, you just have to look at the coach, which tells us that our permeability, mobility, and energy are all within range, and we've got 2 desired traits and 1 trait heat resistant, which is neutral. That's all we need to do. So once we're done with site 1, we just submit. And once again, Cognidor will show us how we performed in site 1, right from step 1 to step 4. And it will tell us our score. It will tell us how we thought and any tips it has for the next site. So for the simulation, once you're done, you just need to click continue. This is exactly what Sea-Wolf is testing. Not whether you can find the prettiest microbe, but whether you can build the right combination. That's what a useful results screen should do. Show you what worked, where the trio landed, and why this was better than all other close options. Now let me zoom out for a second and tell you what you should take away from this. If you understand this walkthrough properly, there are 4 habits you should carry into the real game. Habit 1. In step 1, bias toward the desired trait and the hardest bottleneck. For this site, that was light sensitive and permeability. Habit 2. In step 2, do not ask whether a microbe is perfect. Ask whether it is worth keeping alive. That is a completely different mindset. In habit 3, do not build a giant messy pool in step 3. Get to a serious final shortlist. In habit 4, in step 4, test combinations systematically. Do not guess. Use Cognidor's study guide and Trier Analyzer to average the numbers, to check the trait, to check the undesired trait, and then submit. If you practice those 4 habits, the game becomes much less intimidating. Now, from a Cognidor perspective, this is where Cognidor becomes valuable. Because the problem with Sea-Wolf is not just that it is difficult. The problem is that it is difficult in a way that can feel unclear. And that is exactly where people lose confidence. What Cognidor can do well is turn that uncertainty into structure. By helping you understand which trio to choose, where your averages landed, whether you missed the undesired trait, whether you accidentally included the undesired trait, and what the better trio was. That is the difference between just taking a simulation and actually learning from one. If you want to practice this kind of reasoning in a way that is structured, coachable, and tied to real answer logic, check out Cognidor. And if you found this walkthrough useful, stay with us, because we're also going to break down other Cognidor assessment tools in a practical and step-by-step way so that you can win the assessment battle. See you in the next one.